Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My nerd road.
Just let it in.
And welcome to it, a Star Wars show. I'm your host, Jon Justice, for this impromptu bonus episode of my weekly My Nerd World Star Wars podcast. Yesterday was May the 4th. I hope you had a fantastic May the 4th. I had an interesting May the 4th that started off rough, but then ended up becoming one of the best May the 4th be with you holidays, Star Wars holidays that I'd had. And I was considering doing a podcast yesterday and just throughout the course of the day and enjoying nothing but Star Wars all day long, I decided to wait. And I've really just had Star Wars on the brain, especially because we watched some more Star Wars today. My NASCAR race has been delayed for rain in Kansas, and I thought, you know what? I want to come down and just do an impromptu podcast. Wish you a belated happy May the 4th holiday and talk a little bit about what I've experienced over the course of the past 24 hours, including some new Star Wars information to share with you. So thank you so much for checking out the podcast. I hope you enjoy this bonus episode as we talk about all things Star Wars once again, and I share my love and joy of this fandom.
When I found you, I saw raw, untamed power. And beyond that, something truly special.
Now, I've always celebrated the May the 4th holiday, and I've talked about this in years past. It's a little difficult. Not difficult, but when you're a Star Wars fan like I am, kind of like every day is Star Wars Day. But there are times when I move away and don't watch nearly as much Star Wars, or I get frustrated like a lot of fans do. And this year, for whatever reason, I don't know if it was because it was happening on a Saturday. I don't know if it's because I was going to see The Phantom Menace in theaters. I decided I really wanted to get into it. And starting Saturday morning off, it was a little bit rough. There was some tensions around the house and, just family stuff going on. And individuals, a little bit of just minor family squabbling and infighting, and didn't seem to be a lot of excitement about going to go see The Phantom Menace. Thankfully, it all turned around, and the rest of the day was absolutely fantastic. So let me tell you a little bit about what I watched throughout the day, because I decided, this being Star Wars Day, May the 4th, I want to watch nothing but Star Wars. Now, this can be a difficult task, as I'm only one person in the house, and not everybody loves Star Wars as much as I do. But when I got up in the morning on my Sling TV app, if you've never seen these before, and I've talked about this in the past, Vice has a series, their Icons Unearthed series, and they were running them yesterday. And I recorded them again. I've watched them all before, but they really are interesting insights into all of the first two trilogies, the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. What's interesting about these particular documentaries is that, unlike the Empire documentary that was on the initial DVD release of the original trilogy, Empire of Dreams, now it's available on the Disney Plus app. These Vice documentaries aren't officially sanctioned by Lucasfilm, and so you end up getting a lot more in terms of details of what took place with the making of these films, and things that typically you probably wouldn't see agreed to by George or Disney at this point in time, or Lucasfilm. These are interviews done by people who are a part of these projects that aren't directly tied to the studios now. And so you get more insight than you did before. So here's an example. Then Marcia Lucas, George Lucas's first wife, did a lot, helped a lot in the editing and the creation of that first film. It was actually Marcia Lucas who came up with now the signature wipes that we see in the films. Apparently, she had used these for something else, for some other project completely separate from Star Wars in her work on, I believe, television. And she suggested that, hey, for the major scene transitions, why don't we do these wipes? And now, of course, they've become synonymous with Star Wars movies. There's also interviews with Jon Dykstra, who rather infamously, and this is covered in the Light and Magic documentary, but they don't really get into all the details of it. He was a part of the special effects team for A New Hope. After A New Hope was completed, George Lucas decided to move the operation of what would become Industrial Light and Magic up to Marin County in Northern California. And Jon Dykstra didn't go. He didn't want to go move to Marin. It's documented in the Light and Magic series that he, in the interim before the run-up to The Empire Strikes Back and the special effects studio moving to Northern California from Van Nuys, that they used the equipment in the existing Van Nuys studio that they used for A New Hope to go and do the special effects for Battlestar Galactica. What was not covered in the Light and Magic documentary or the Empire Dreams documentary, but is covered in the Vice documentary, is that this was actually a major point of contention with George. And Jon Dykstra had gone and created a separate studio because ILM wasn't fully fleshed out yet in a company. So he created his own studio, but was using a lot of the same equipment that was apparently left behind, too big to carry. He had purchased it, and there were actually lawsuits that went about because, according to the Vice documentary, George Lucas was somewhat frustrated that the techniques that were being used for his films that were so unique to Star Wars at the time, as Empire Strikes Back was going into production, were now being used for lower budget science fiction, and specifically Battlestar Galactica, which many people who were involved in Star Wars saw as just a blatant ripoff of Star Wars. So that's the kind of insight you can get inside those Vice documentaries. So if you have the opportunity to track them down, and again, I use Sling. I cut the cord about a year or so ago, and I use Sling, and they're available on Sling. I'm sure if you go to track them down online through Vice, you can go and find these documentaries. So I started the day off watching those. I had been working through The Mandalorian Season 3 for a while, but I hadn't gone back to it, and I went and watched the season finale to Season 3, which, of course, wraps up the story up until this point. And I have not given that final episode of The Mandalorian enough credit. That is an absolutely stellar episode. It is another one of those really good examples when it comes to the live-action content that Lucasfilm has been producing, where it really ends up ramming in a lot of what we sort of expect, or I expect, to come with a sort of fully well-rounded Star Wars story. The intrigue, the battles, but at the end, you get this one-on-one battle between Moff Gideon, and of course it ends up being a larger battle with Moff Gideon and the Mandalorian at the end of that episode, with Bo-Katan and Grogu getting in on the action, while you have this larger battle taking place of Moff Gideon's forces now. Here's his Beskar trooper forces with their jetpacks squaring off against the different factions of the Mandalorians, along with this space battle that takes place. As Axe Wolves goes to take their destroyer down to the planet and ends up crashing and killing Moff Gideon at the end. It is a very fully fleshed out and well-rounded episode. And the action sequences at the end of that episode, especially when the two warring factions, Moff Gideon's army and then the army of Mandalorians, come after each other with jetpacks very reminiscent in the way that it's shot of the type of angles that we get for the space battles typically within the Star Wars films, but in this case, they're bodies and individuals with jetpacks. There's one particular shot of Bo-Katan where she's got the Darksaber and she's flying down into the cavern and she's holding it up in position, and it's just an absolutely iconic shot. So, let's see, I watched that. Then we went off to the theater to go see The Phantom Menace and the extended look at the Acolyte. I'll talk more about that in just a moment because we did get an official Acolyte trailer that has really changed my opinion about this show, especially after seeing that extended footage. When we got home later in the afternoon, I made a list here and I got to bring it back. I got to bring it back up again. When we got back home in the afternoon, I was asking Melinda if she had to watch something Star Wars, what would she watch? And she said that she would watch Solo. And so I said, okay, well, you don't have to watch something Star Wars. I know it's May the 4th, but you don't have to. She's like, no, we can go ahead and watch Solo. So prior to Solo, we watched a bit of Tales of the Empire. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment because we finished that today. And then I had been, through the course of doing my work, I had been watching a bit of A New Hope recently, and I threw that back on. I was about halfway through. So I ended up watching the second half of A New Hope with Logan. We watched, again, a few episodes of Tales of the Empire, watched Solo, and then as I went off to bed, I watched a little bit of the season finale, the final episode of Rebels before I went to sleep. And then this morning we went and concluded watching Tales of the Empire. So that's probably the most Star Wars that I've ever watched on a May the 4th. Be that as it may, it brought me to do this episode today and has really got me back in a Star Wars groove and mood again because I enjoyed so much of the content that I watched. So let's back up. I want to talk a little bit about The Phantom Menace. Before we went to go see The Phantom Menace, the official trailer for The Acolyte dropped. And again, I'll share with you my thoughts on that in a moment. But first, this was the first time that I remember seeing The Phantom Menace in theaters since probably its initial release. I'm trying to think of another opportunity where I went back to the theater to see it, maybe for a re-release, and I don't think that I ever did. I was planning on seeing it when it came out in 3D, and I ended up not going to see it in 3D. I think that was coming out right around when The Force Awakens was, and there was also things going on with the move here to Minneapolis. So, I mean, this was the 25th anniversary, and we were closing on probably close to 25 years since I'd seen this film on the big screen.
Will you have a spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down?
I won't go and repeat what I said on the podcast earlier this week about my thoughts of initially seeing The Phantom Menace. I will say that going to the theater with my 17-year-old who had never seen this on the big screen and was familiar with the movie probably because he was coming in and out of me watching it throughout the 17 years that he has been on this earth. But I don't think he's ever sat down and watched it from beginning to end. And we had a bit of part of the tension that I was talking about was we were having a bit of a rough morning. My 17-year-old and his dad, and so it was a little bit of a tense conversation as we were heading to the theater, just because there was a bit of a lack of communication on my part and a desire to watch Tales of the Jedi and Tales of the Empire and having to wait. And so we were going back and forth, and we had this very, very long conversation on the drive to the theater, but we ended up working out our differences. And by the time we arrived, we were smiling and laughing and looking forward to seeing this movie. I talked about families on the last podcast, and that is going to be a moment in the run-up to go see that film that, oddly, I'm not going to forget anytime soon. That being said, it was a real joyous experience. The theater was pretty much full. Mostly dudes my age or couples older than I was. Some individuals bringing in their toy lightsabers. Another guy had an R2-D2 that was sitting in the empty seat next to him. And just to have the lights go down and to have the raucous John Williams score, and then the opening crawl, it just doesn't get any better than that. And it continues to remind me how Star Wars needs to be on the big screen. A movie that I know by heart. I don't know how many times I've seen that film throughout the years, but just had a really good time watching it. Because Star Wars is just fun. I could hear Kyle chuckling to himself throughout the movie, making little comments to me. He was getting into the intrigue of Padme playing the handmaiden as she, as they arrived on Tatooine, and was making jokes about that and snickering at Jar Jar. I'll tell you what, Jar Jar never worked as well as he did for me until watching The Phantom Menace on Saturday. That was, I had zero issue with Jar Jar. Now, Jar Jar never bothered me all that much either way. I remember walking out of the theater seeing it the first time and going, that was an odd character and that was made for kids. But for some reason, time, in my opinion, has really done Jar Jar quite a bit of justice. And I actually found his character enjoyable while watching the film. Even though I knew every beat of the movie, it never got old. I wasn't waiting for it to end. I just was there along with the ride and enjoyed, every minute of it. And I take back what I said on a previous podcast about the final duel between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Maul. There is one shot in the Theed, leaving the Theed hangar, going into the energy room on Theed when they start the duel. There's one or two moves that Ewan McGregor does. And it's a distant shot. It's sort of the camera's placed back. They're kind of really small on the frame. Where Ewan McGregor's moves are incredibly choreographed. That's the one moment I don't like. The rest of the battle is absolutely top-notch, especially after, spoiler alert, Darth Maul takes down Qui-Gon Jinn, and the energy field opens up, and Obi-Wan Kenobi rushes in, and he and Darth Maul start going at it. That whole sequence, right up until the end, is just spectacular. I mean, talk about a ferocious fight. And just masterfully choreographed. I just was watching it just going, man, I forgot how good this really is. I had issues in the past of the battle that's taking place. The grass battle between the battle droids and the Gungans, and Jar Jar Binks' antics. They don't bother me. It's silly. There were things that I would change about the film. That would be it. But just really enjoyed all of it, and got me excited for the next time I sit down to watch Attack of the Clones, which I could probably do now based on the amount of time that it's going to take for them to drive the racetrack for my NASCAR race. So let's talk a little bit about The Acolyte. This is a show that I'm still cautiously optimistic, but now actually getting a little bit more excited for.
This is not going to go the way you think.
I won't rehash my concerns over this. The concerns that much of what has plagued the Disney content as of late, and the injection of agenda items that are completely unnecessary and unrelatable. I'll wait to judge the show when it comes out in full to see if it's escaped those types of controversies. The new full trailer for The Acolyte has me finally excited for it. The first trailer did not do anything for me. Just didn't grab me. I wasn't interested. I'm not familiar yet with the High Republic era, this taking place hundreds of years before the events of the Phantom Menace. Of course, the High Republic taking place much further away from those events of the Phantom Menace. The first trailer didn't really do anything for me. I've grown accustomed to the live action shows looking the way that they do. I'll just dispense with that. I think that it would be better if they made them look like Andor, Be that as it may, they don't, but they all very much look consistent. And I also watched the final episode of Ahsoka yesterday, too. I forgot to throw that in there. I was actually saving that last episode of Ahsoka for May the 4th, so I needed to go and mention that. And I'll get back to that in a moment, because if you haven't watched Tales of the Empire, it has some very interesting connections to Ahsoka. I'm intrigued now by the trailer, and what they showed at the screening of The Phantom Menace was essentially what I'm going to guess is the opening scene. The Carrie-Anne Moss Jedi character, Carrie-Anne Moss being the actress from The Matrix, inside of sort of a restaurant cantina. The vibe looked cool. The music sounded great. And the antagonist lead character of the show, the Acolyte, arrives. This is the masked woman that we saw in the original trailer. You saw a bit of this fight in that first trailer. You see a little bit more of it in the official trailer. This is we saw the full, probably 3 or 4 minutes worth of the opening sequence, and it's basically these two battling it out. The villain, the Acolyte, using knives to attack individuals in the bar that are trying to stop her, and then the Jedi Carrie-Anne Moss character until the end, where she pulls out a lightsaber after the Acolyte begins to hurl the knives, force throw them at the Jedi, and she strikes them down with her green lightsaber. The choreography was absolutely spectacular. They did some really interesting Jedi Force moves that I hadn't seen before, expressing swiftness of speed and agility moving across items inside this 2-story indoor restaurant bar area. So the aesthetics, the vibe, the choreography, the music, all had me very intrigued. And then what we see in the trailer of this, a Jedi has been murdered. Who is doing this? Obviously, there are some flashbacks of a master serving, a Jedi master training Padawans. One of these allegedly ends up becoming the Acolyte, who grows up to be a dark side user. And at the end of the trailer, you get this menacing black-red lightsaber wielding character that looks to have a mask on that could be a Knight of Ren, to be honest with you, but has this very creepy, wide smile gap with what looks like metal teeth at the bottom of it. It just has me absolutely intrigued by what I saw. We see the Jedi Temple, and it's very interesting when we see the Jedi Temple in the trailer for the Acolyte, because it's actually raised up above what would essentially be the ground level of Coruscant. And if you compare this to what we know of the Jedi Temple from the prequel movies, they're lower. They're actually flush with the rest of the city. So clearly, denoting that this is a time long before, and the Jedi Temple has since been rebuilt. Some of the lines that are being used in the trailer, saying there can be no peace, things of this nature. Also very interested to see that we got some extended shots of some of the spacecraft, which I was really excited, had definitely a Star Wars feel, but clearly are a part of this era, because I don't think you can maybe place them inside of the Phantom Menace or the prequels, but they definitely had a different aesthetic to them, including a really interesting shot of a ship approaching the planet, which almost looks as if it detaches from a portion of it, almost like it's a hyperspace ring. And then some interesting shots of the ships traveling through what looks to be an ice field in space, asteroid field, but it looked more like ice. Reminding me quite a bit of a sequence that I actually have in the second book in my EMBARK series, Treasure in Darkness, where they're actually chasing around the rings of Saturn. But again, just has me excited for this show in a way that I was initially when I heard it announced. A dark side centric show outside of the era that we've seen before, telling a serialized story instead of an episodic story. And again, not familiar, having not read any of the High Republic material, this taking place much later after the High Republic, but this is considered to be in the High Republic era. Overall, I'm very excited for what this show could potentially be. Again, I'm cautiously optimistic, but based off of what I've seen so far, now I'm looking forward to this, as where before I really was kind of like, I don't know, based off the initial impressions and some of what's been said inside of the press surrounding the show. So this is coming in less than a month, so it won't be too long until we get some more new Star Wars content. Now, speaking of new Star Wars content, I do want to talk a little bit about Tales of the Empire.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
So I won't spoil anything since this just came out on Saturday, and if you haven't gone to watch it yet, I won't spoil anything. I'll just add a couple of tidbits in here that I don't think are spoilers, but could potentially enhance your viewing experience. So 6 episodes in all, runs about 90 minutes in total if you watch them all back to back. The first 3 episodes and the second 3 episodes tell 2 different specific stories. The first 3 episodes are basically the story of Morgan Elsbeth. We were first introduced to Morgan Elsbeth in Season 2 of The Mandalorian in the episode where Rosario Dawson's Ahsoka first appeared, when she goes to liberate that planet from Morgan Elsbeth and her reign over that planet, which of course puts her into custody in order for her to break out at the start of the Ahsoka series, and then we have what happened in Ahsoka. Those are the first 3 stories. The second 3 stories tells the story of the former Jedi Barriss Offee, who turned to the dark side going all the way back to the Clone Wars episodes, and a complete story arc for her. I enjoyed both of these 3 episodes. I enjoyed the Morgan Elsbeth episodes more than the Barriss Offee ones, specifically because with the first 3 episodes of Tales of the Empire, you now can watch this very interesting arc and almost complete story, starting with the first episode of Tales of the Empire. You watch those first 3. Then you can go and watch the Ahsoka episode from The Mandalorian Season 2, and then you could actually jump to Ahsoka. And it creates a nice little linear story. And I've said so many times on previous podcasts that one of the things that I do enjoy about the abundance of content that we're getting from Star Wars is it's the ability that they have to go and shed more light on content that we've already seen and fill in some of the details. And that certainly is the case with the first 3 episodes of Tales of the Empire. Somewhat with the second 3, because we do, and you see this in the trailers, we spend a lot of time getting to know a little bit more of the backstory of the Inquisitors. So much so that it has me wanting to go and watch Kenobi again, which is a show that I've been incredibly critical of. But now that I've got a little bit more backstory on the Inquisitors that I've always enjoyed, including an Inquisitor that was in the series but didn't get a lot of time and does get a lot of time in Tales of the Empire, I'm very much intrigued to go back to watch Kenobi again. And to watch the Kenobi series with fresh eyes, now that I'm in this place of appreciation for Star Wars content that I hadn't really been before, without maybe not being so critical and just enjoy it for what it is. I go through phases like that. I don't know if everybody's like me, but I go through phases like that where sometimes I'm going to be more critical than other times. But this is one of those moments where I'm just really enjoying the content and I'm in the mood to watch more Star Wars content. And there's so much Star Wars content to consume. Sometimes I have a hard time sort of picking what it is that I want to watch. And typically I go and lean back into the theatrical releases. But at the moment, with The Acolyte coming out and my excitement over that trailer, and now having more of a backstory, not just on Morgan Elsbeth. I would probably do an Ahsoka rewatch, but I just finished rewatching the entire series again. I think I'm going to go back and visit the Kenobi series again. listen, all of this gives me hope for what we can get in the future. I think that the pandemic took a toll. Let me rephrase that. The pandemic did take a toll on almost every single facet of life in ways that we still won't be able to see for decades to come, and still is impacting us even today. We have a lot of emerging technology now, and we have ways to communicate almost, yearly. It seems to increase more and more, which really ends up dividing the fandom further and further than it did before. But the point I want to make is that I think there was sort of a gap in creative content in the middle of when we were all going through these horrible circumstances in life for those, for that year and a half or so, that ended up having an impact on a lot of the content that we saw. And there were a lot of changes that were made to the content that were good. And I'm seeing now sort of this course correction taking place. The storytelling is just solid in Ahsoka. It's solid in Tales of the Empire. Didn't have any issues whatsoever. I'm hoping that will be the case when it comes to the Acolyte, and I'm hoping that'll be the case when it comes to storytelling in the future from Star Wars. Right now, I'm hyped on Star Wars. You can thank May the 5th for that on this Revenge of the, or May the 4th for that on this Revenge of the 5th. Again, I hope you had a fantastic May the 5th. And I guess that wraps it up for this bonus content, for this bonus podcast today. I really was excited to come talk about Star Wars and share this with you, and I didn't want to go and wait until the episode next week. So we'll see about the episode next week, and if anything transpires between now and then, I imagine things will get somewhat quiet relating to Star Wars for a little bit. Now that we've just got past the official holiday and we've received so much new content. We'll certainly be getting more promotion for the Acolyte, but this is probably going to be the extent of the trailer that we get. But if you haven't gone and watched it yet, if you're on the Disney Plus app, it's available on there, or head on over to YouTube. And if you're looking to go and absorb some science fiction space opera content outside of Star Wars, I hope you'll take a moment and head on over to Amazon.com and check out my 7-book science fiction space opera series, EMBARK. It's an exciting mix of Star Wars, Ready Player One, the science fiction adventures from the 70s all the way up to the 2000s. A little bit of Fast and Furious in that first book, I'm not going to lie. After Earth faces its end, follow pilots Taft, Katha, and their crew on a journey of survival across the galaxy as they fight for humanity's future. Again, available in ebook, Kindle Unlimited, paperback, audiobook as well. Head on over to Amazon.com, search for Jon Justice, and pick up your preferred copy. As a matter of fact, I just saw a post on X that the theatrical re-release of The Phantom Menace brought in $8.1 million domestically and around $15 million worldwide. So for what it's worth, I don't think it matters. Not like they need any more money, but it was certainly a lot of fun to go see that film in a theater with a whole bunch of fellow Star Wars fans. And of course, it'd have been just as great if it had just been me and my son, whether we're in the theater or whether we're sitting at home. But I love that theater experience because all of the distractions are away. You don't have your phone sitting next to you. You can just go and enjoy it for what it is in a darkened movie theater. It doesn't get much better than that. Thank you so much for checking out this bonus episode. I hope you'll go and take a look at my science fiction series. If you already have, thank you. But if you haven't gone and left a review for the books yet, please do me a favor and head on over to Amazon.com and leave me a review. All right, I'm going to go see how the track drying is doing for my NASCAR race. I hope wherever you are, you're having a fantastic day, that you're happy, you're healthy, and you're safe. God bless, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Bye.
The Force will be with you. Always.
My nerd world.